Okay, so JLL, you've fairly recently published your 2025 Global Data Center Outlook, and I guess the two sort of headline topics, findings, whatever, around AI and sustainability. So mm, perhaps no surprises, but just thoughts as to, why they are still or, particularly key issues at the moment.
Yeah, the key themes out of the report really are growth, and in that we're looking at partly that's AI driven, as you say, but actually fundamentally there's still, we think, about 75% of demand in the market is coming from the more traditional use cases, storage, cloud applications, and so forth. But artificial intelligence, no doubt, has and continues to drive significant elements of growth, and that's changing the market dynamic quite materially. The second theme, which is where sustainability comes in, I think, is resources. As we see the scale of requirement, both from how much capacity do we need and where do we need it, and indeed what's driving that demand at a national level, so country demand as well. We're therefore seeing a really interesting dynamic around resources, and that's as broad as, yes, power availability, but also there are some bottlenecks around the world, and then there's the drive to try and get green power. These data center developments are huge, or rather they're significantly bigger than they were not that long ago. And our research is telling us we think there's about $170 billion worth of asset value that's going to be needing some form of financing over the next 12 months or so. That's a significant sum that the industry has not been used to raising. So that creates a dynamic. So resource in this form of capital is key. And then inevitably, you got to have a lot of people to build these things and run these things. So I think the key themes, yes, AI and sustainability, but actually more broadly, it's one of growth and resources to enable that growth. And then doing that in a way that enables both the end users, operators, technology companies and operators meeting their pretty stringent sustainability goals, albeit market dynamics are probably shifting that quite markedly, certainly in certain parts of the world.
Okay, so in terms of growth, as you say, so AI, I mean, everyone's talking about it, but you're suggesting it's maybe clearly it is a factor when it comes to data center growth, but it's perhaps not as sort of all-consuming when it comes to expansion. It's just the fact that for every day, more digital real estate happens, more devices, etc., and we just need more and more data centers to sort of underpin that. But is at least the AI sort of expansion demand having an impact on the data center, the placing new demands on data centers, shall we say, at least?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I think well documented now that the development of chip technology is enabling the acceleration of artificial intelligence, and the intensity, or rather the density of those chips in the sense of density of the power requirement, is having a marked shift. One is from a pure scale volume play, we need or rather the technology companies need a lot of chips, and that requires a lot of power in bigger buildings than they've previously seen before. Gigawatt campuses are not now uncommon in at least discussion. They're certainly rare in the sense of being built. So yes, artificial intelligence is impacting both the volume, but also the design of the fabric and the overall data center network. And the nature of AI, because it's not just AI, it's a bit of a headline topic, isn't it? But AI training, for example, as they've again been well documented, that's very power hungry, but it's less location specific. So data centers can be, for training purposes, being developed in parts of the world where previously you wouldn't have considered feasible for a data center. Whereas more inference or traditional cloud will still require to be close to the population and the enterprise in which it's serving. I think that the drivers to continue growth yes, the advancement in artificial intelligence, the plays there, digital economies, government policies are really key. You're seeing it over the last, as recent as the last couple of weeks, announcements all around the world, whether it be the US or Middle East or UK or indeed France, government policies which are driven by a desire or a need to remain relevant in the global economy and marketplace. That's countries remaining relevant and keeping their economies competitive with some growth and productivity. You're seeing significant policy and therefore investment on the back of that into investment in this critical infrastructure. You're also seeing subsea cables coming online, which are creating new hubs, if you like. Examples might be, we've seen South Korea put in new subsea cables, which has opened the market up there in the sense of it was previously really a domestic market. But now we expect the global technology companies to have an interest because that has connectivity into broader Asia. Mumbai is a great example. Undersea cables coming through, creating a hub there because of connectivity into Middle East, parts of Asia and Africa. Madrid's one, something we've seen. Again, connectivity, and most recently, Madrid also connected to the US. So there's a number of elements that are driving growth. AI, yes, right at the heart of it, and that's attracting the big dollars.
Okay, and you referenced earlier on the sustainability is front and center as well, I guess, for the industry. But yeah, to your point about some of these government announcements, there certainly is the suggestion, shall we say, that AI, sustainability mustn't be allowed to get in the way of AI and progress. So the industry's been on this journey and it still is on this, net zero roadmap, etc. Do you think that there will be a slowing down of that progress because they're almost being given a green light, whether it's, shall we say, the gentleman across the Atlantic who's, drill baby drill, or some slightly more subtle suggestions that sustainability mustn't be allowed to impede, business growth, shall we say?
Yeah, I think you said it there, Phil. The reality is that the economics, business drivers are driving progress in this industry. You say sustainability is stage center. I slightly regret saying this, but it's not. There is an imperative for operators to deliver an outcome which is very cognizant of the resources it uses. And you are seeing significant investment into operational design, operational efficiency, that is good for us from a sustainability perspective. And it is driven in part because of either national regulatory environments or end user specification for design. But it's also been driven by pure economics. You do this because it lowers costs, and you're seeing a lot of operators having that mindset. You are also seeing, we are seeing the shift to find renewable power really becoming a real thing. It's been a long time coming, conversationally wise. It's all very well saying getting renewable energy, but actually having the connections, the grid infrastructure to make that happen in the right places has and will continue to be a challenge. The arrival of nuclear as a solution in the data center industry, it's been a conversation for some time, but actually in the main, behind closed doors or on the periphery, that is stage center in the sense of being part of the solution. And we know that a number of the big technology companies have taken on PPAs relating to power purchase agreements that connected to nuclear power, either existing facilities or bringing infrastructure back online. And we also know, our research tells us, there's something like 100 odd schemes under consideration relating to the small modular reactors, which will be, we believe, part of the solution, but that's yet to be proven at scale. There's definitely benefits in the sense of the cost, the modular nature of those things that can be flexible and scaled up. but we don't expect that to be really online much before, if at all, before 2030 and then onwards, because of the obvious complications of it being a nuclear power source, albeit it is going to be part of the solution from what we see in the industry.
So in terms of the power situation you've described, I mean, as I understand it, sort of global demand total, not just data centers, which are a small part, is going to be, I think, doubling in the next few years, but if not, well, maybe as far as a decade. So there's a massive requirement for that. And is there enough power to go round? And if there is, say, as in the UK, people say potentially there is, but it's getting it to where it needs to. So the transmission infrastructure is lacking potentially. So just your thoughts as to how much of a problem getting on for a crisis this might be if the right things aren't done, whether again it's government's responsibility to build out infrastructure, data centers to build microgrids and take on the owners. Just your thoughts as to how this problem can be addressed, I suppose.
Yeah, I certainly don't see it as a crisis, and I think there's quite local dynamics to this. There are definitely where there are data center hubs traditionally, and they continue to grow. The likes of, let's say, Singapore or Virginia or other places around the world, because data centers are clustered and continue to grow around those clusters, there can be bottlenecks around accessing power and infrastructure available to enable that continued growth. Where we're seeing solutions to that are, well, going to where the power is one element, and we're certainly seeing that through the work we do and the conversations we have with big technology companies and the operators. We are now sourcing development land in locations previously we wouldn't have done. So we're going to the power. That still has to work from the wider technology infrastructure that is at play, connectivity, end user, customer, and so forth, and also application within the data center. There will be locations where there are governments have done and continue to do to step in to limit the amount of power available to data center development. And that's being done in a number of different ways, whether that be putting more stringent processes in place up front to reduce speculation, of which there has been some, which isn't helpful to anybody, or it might be setting higher efficiency standards from a design point of view, which has happened, but is a challenge given the nature of speed of the development of the technology and the design requirements around that, because you set regulation today based on one set of criteria, and we're seeing designs of data centers shift quite quickly in certain domains to make that less effective for a national government or a state. What we're seeing is the infrastructure funds are deploying capital in not just the data center development itself, but also in the infrastructure required to enable it. So we are seeing significant amounts of capital going into development of small modular reactors, for example, but also finding ways to have on-site power production, but also building in the resilience that is necessary for a 24-hour operation, the resilience that's required for that operation. So there are, I would say, challenges, no doubt, but the necessity is the mother of innovation, is it not? And we're certainly seeing that play through the accelerated investment and innovation in power sourcing and infrastructure, I think is quite telling and exciting.
Yeah, and in terms of the investor appetite, I think you sort of explained it a little bit there, but there seems to be no shortage of folks that still want to invest within the space. So, strong investment. And there's a trend I think you've identified for single tenant data centers, and that continuing, but also increased interest in joint ventures. I don't know whether that's to help some of the more, shall we say, developing regions. Just talk us through, if you like, the I suppose the profile of that investment.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So you've got institutional investors continue to invest or put capital into, let's call it data center platforms. We're seeing quite a lot of that as the market has consolidated, or rather the big players have looked for global platforms. We also see, let's say, private equity players finding channels to get exposure to the market through providing development finance or funding. And that can be for existing operators looking to scale up. And that might be stabilize their existing portfolios of assets with really strong governance or really investment grade tenants in there, giving them access to capital to go again into their next stage of development and growth. We also see, you mentioned JVs as a big trend across all of this is scaling, and how do organizations scale up, whether it be the supply chain or the operators or the technology businesses. A lot of operators are relatively small beginnings, with a relative modest number of locations in which they're operating in. For them to then reach into new geographies because the demand is there and they have the operational know-how and they have the customer relationships, but they don't necessarily have either scale or the local know-how in the sense of legislation, the way business is done, or the necessary operational licenses. That's where we're seeing JVs come to bear. So that's a coming together of either money with operational know-how, or operational know-how and local specific connections and infrastructure. So that there are a few examples there of how we're seeing the JV market, or the opportunity for JVs between different players, accelerating. The other element is we're seeing more creative finance solutions. Back to my point around there being something like 170 billion of asset value to be financed in some form, a lot of that being development finance. We saw 3 or so years ago the first well-known asset-backed securitized financing arrangement outside of the US and Europe, and we were involved with that, and we expected that to be a trend to start to accelerate, and that was 3 years ago. Took a while, but only in the last 6 months we're starting to see that come through. So that's more structured finance arrangements, which really we hadn't seen in the industry before. So lots of different dynamics playing out in the financing of this growth.
Yeah, and in terms of a sort of overall picture of the industry's prospects, I mean, it sounds a fairly positive future. Do you think there are any sort of serious issues that might, become sort of from little bumps in the road to something more significant, or are you confident that, if you like, the necessary knowledge and finance, etc., is there to address them in a timely fashion, or whether it's, I don't know, more stringent legislation suddenly coming from different sectors or whatever? Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to whether it's all a rosy picture or just one or two things people need to bear in mind, shall we say?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not all a rosy picture, but the fundamentals are really strong. So the demand equation is really strong, whether it be the cloud dynamic, the general digitalization of the world that we live in, and what that means from a requirement from infrastructure, plus the advancement of artificial intelligence, which is continue to accelerate. The demand equation and the fact that the supply is a long way behind that demand means the market is in a strong place. The challenges are, you mentioned timeliness, getting the power at the right time in the right place can take time. So that is an issue about keeping up with the demand, but not around strength of the market. It's possible for smaller operators or new entrants to get it wrong. This is a quick moving industry with some complexity to it and some uncertainty to it. And for those that are new entrants, let's say, with less experience of the operations of a data center and the markets that they sit in, you can see the potential for people overreaching and getting burned. But we believe those with experience will navigate those dynamics pretty effectively. The power balance of how do you square the circle of the opportunity to invest in a critical infrastructure that can be really pivotal to what the human race does over the next lifetime. It's really exciting to be involved with that, with the fact that it is, yes, resource hungry. There is one channel, one idea to say, well, actually, the development of artificial intelligence and the cloud will enable many parts of our society to rise up in the sense of the quality of life that they lead, the optimism around advancements in medicine, for one example, plus along with many others, is one of should prosper a huge amount of optimism, I think. there is definitely some challenge to that, in the sense of there are reasons why nation states are putting a load of time and investment into development of artificial intelligence infrastructure, because they see it as a competitive advantage, or rather it will be an advantage if they stay ahead of the game, and maybe a disadvantage if they don't. And that has really interesting dynamics around the geopolitics stage that we all live within. But my overall, having spoken to over the last couple of weeks, investors, banks, the big technology companies, and a number of operators, the opportunities and the optimism remains very strong, with a cognizance that there are plenty of challenges ahead regarding how do we manage that growth responsibly, and how do we manage the finite resources available to us in a way that we get the right outcomes.
Maybe just finally, in terms of the data centers sort of role, I mean, perhaps a crude characterization, but once upon a time, they sort of, you build a data center, it operates in sort of isolation and, minds its own business, etc. Do you think the suggestion that data centers need to become sort of good citizens, participate in the development of wider infrastructure within communities, etc., do you think that's got some credence, particularly in helping develop power resources and stuff, or do you think they will kind of continue to sort of try and almost keep out of sight, in the corner of industrial estates, and hopefully no one will kind of notice them? But just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how their profile might change, I suppose.
There will be a need and a commitment to integrate this infrastructure with the communities in which they sit. They need to employ people. They need to often expand, therefore need to be a contributor to their local society to frankly get the consent, permissions, whatever they may be, to build out. And also they have a lot to give, I think. So yes, there's the infrastructure required to enable local economies to develop their digital arm, if you like, is a real one. There is a lot of work to be done to make that a better connection, and you're seeing some companies invest in that really materially, and others less so, the reality. So no, I don't see these things or these organizations deliberately trying to hide away. There's too much exposure, but also opportunity, I believe, to have a better impact and a broader positive impact on the environments and the societies in which they sit within. Not without the challenges, of course, but there is opportunity to do more in that space, and I think there's some commitment in some good quarters of the industry to do that.
Okay, it's been great to chat, and some really great insights as well. So I really appreciate the time you give me, Jonathan. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Good to speak.